You spend your life begging for the approval of people. Niccolò Machiavelli argued that love is a volatile bond broken at every opportunity of self-interest. Yet, why does contemporary game theory suggest that your empathy is kindness is a temporary debt that your enemies will eventually refuse to pay? True dominance begins the moment you prioritize the cold certainty of respect over the fickle warmth of love. In the corridors of real power, likability is a liability that invites betrayal and breeds contempt. Most people will never tell you this because they want you predictable. When Niccolò Machiavelli wrote Il Principe in 1513 during his exile in San Casciano, he wasn't writing a moral guide. He was writing an autopsy of human nature. He observed that men are ungrateful, fickle, pretenders, and deceivers. In chapter 17, he delivered the cold verdict that has terrified the weak for centuries. It is He called fear molto più sicuro, much safer. This is because love is held by a chain of obligation. That chain snaps the very second a person's self-interest is at stake. You see it every day. Your friends and loyal employees will shower you with praise and offer their lives while the sun is shining and the danger is remote. But when the winter of conflict arrives, their love evaporates. It is a gift they give you, which means they can take it back whenever they choose. Fear is different. Fear is something you own. It is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails to keep men in line. When you rely on love, you are a beggar asking for permission to lead. When you rely on fear, you are the sovereign of your own environment. People do not betray those they truly fear because the cost of betrayal is written in loss. To reach the height of power, you must first kill the desperate need for external validation. You must accept that the respect of the masses is not found in their affection, but in their hesitation to cross you. If you allow people to feel comfortable in your presence, you are inviting them to test your boundaries. Power is not a popularity contest. It is a calculation of consequences. Stop being liked and start being necessary. Start being the consequence they cannot afford to face. Consider the ruins of the Romagna in 1502. It was a wasteland of lawlessness, populated by petty lords who robbed their subjects rather than ruling them. Cesare Borgia did not arrive with a message of hope or a plea for cooperation. He arrived with Remirro de Orco. He gave this man absolute power to pass. Remirro used the only language the masses truly understand: selective, crushing gravity. He was efficient, he was brutal, but Borgia was a master of the secondary move. He knew that raw cruelty, while effective for order, creates a toxic residue of hatred. Once the peace was won, Borgia acted again. He had Remirro executed and left his body in 2 pieces in the Piazza of Cesena. The people were satisfied. They were stunned. Most importantly, they realized that Borgia held the power of life and death. He used fear to build order, then used. This is the hallmark of a sovereign architect. You see this same cold machinery operating in the modern glass towers of industry. Look at the legacy of Jack Welch at General Electric. They called him Neutron Jack for a reason. He did not seek the affection of his 100,000-strong workforce. He sought their absolute compliance through He codified the rank and yank model, specifically the 20-70-10 rule. Every single year, the bottom 10% of the workforce was liquidated. High performance was not a goal. It was the only way to avoid the professional guillotine. It did not matter if these individuals had served for decades. The system demanded a sacrifice to maintain the pressure. This is the doctrine of deterrence applied to the corporate ladder. When survival is on the line, productivity ceases to be a choice and becomes a reflex. The hierarchy is stabilized not by the promise of a holiday bonus, but by the visible. The world often calls this ruthless. The world is comfortable in its naivety. Order is a fragile artifice that decays the moment the fear of consequences vanishes. Whether it is the U.S. Nuclear Triad costing $1.2 trillion to ensure national survival through the threat of annihilation, or a CEO firing the bottom tier to ensure corporate dominance, the principle is identical. Power is the ability to inflict a cost that no one is willing to pay. Without that cost, your authority is nothing more than a polite request. And in the arena of power, polite requests are the language of the soon-to-be displaced. Build your order on a foundation of credible consequences. Ensure that those beneath you know exactly what they stand to lose. Only then will you find the stability. This is how you maintain the state. This is how you survive the shift from chaos to control. Fear is a surgical blade, not a blunt object. Most amateurs mistake cruelty for power. They lack the restraint required to stay on the right side of the line. Machiavelli warned that while it is safer to be feared than loved, a leader must avoid being hated at all costs. Hatred is the spark that turns a submissive population into a pack of wolves. It is the only emotion strong enough to override the fundamental instinct of self-preservation. When a man hates you, he is willing to die just to see you bleed. You cannot rule a man who has nothing left to lose. To command effectively, you must understand where the boundary lies. It is simpler than you think. You must abstain from the property of your subjects and from their personal honor. In the modern world, this means you do not go after a man's family, his basic livelihood, or his core identity unless it is absolute. Men will forgive the death of a patriarch before. Consider the genius of Cesare Borgia in the Romagna region. The land was saturated with crime and disorder. To fix it, he employed Remirro de Orco, a man known for his cold-blooded. Orco did exactly what was required. He used terror to bring the region to heel. But as order returned, so did a simmering resentment toward the man who had exerted such violence. Borgia saw the shift. He knew that if he remained associated with Orco's methods, the people's fear would ripen into a lethal hatred of the crown. One morning, the citizens of Cesena woke up to find Remirro de Orco's body cut in two in the public square. Everything they believed up to this point was wrong. The people were at once satisfied and stupefied. Borgia had provided the order they lacked and simultaneously punished the hand that delivered the cruelty. He remained the ultimate authority, feared for his power but cleared of the personal animosity that Orco had attracted. This is how a master operates. You utilize fear as a tool of administration, but you never allow it to become a mark of your character. In the corporate hierarchy, this is why the most effective executives use HR departments and performance metrics as their shield. They don't fire you because they dislike you. They fire you because the system requires it. This removes the personal element. It prevents the target from focusing their rage on the individual at the top. It keeps the fear centered on the consequences of failure rather than the person administering them. You must be the architect of the system, not the face of the execution. When you exert power, ensure it feels like an inevitability of the universe, not a whim of your ego. People do not rebel against the gravity that holds them down. They only rebel against the hand that pushes them. Keep your distance. Maintain the dread of punishment, but never make it a spectacle of your own pleasure. The moment a subordinate believes your actions are driven by spite rather than strategy, you have created an enemy who will wait years for the chance to strike. A sovereign who is feared is secure. A sovereign who is hated is merely waiting for the inevitable betrayal. Keep your hands clean by making sure the blood you shed. Never let the target think they were singled out for who they are, but rather for what they failed to do. This is the difference between an emperor and a tyrant. One builds a lasting peace through the threat of force. The other builds a burning palace through the exercise of malice. Stay clear, stay cold, and stay feared. Just never let them hate you. Fear is a surgical tool. It is not a blunt instrument of rage. Most amateurs confuse the two. They become tyrants because they cannot control their own impulses. This is where you fail. Machiavelli was precise about this distinction. You must be feared, but you must never be hated. Hatred is the fire that consumes the throne. Fear is the cold wall that protects it. To avoid hatred, keep your hands off their property. In the modern world, this translates to their livelihood and their fundamental dignity. If you take a man's assets, you give him a cause. If you take a man's future, he has nothing left to lose. A man with nothing to lose is a ghost in your machine. He becomes an invisible enemy who no longer cares about the dread of punishment. You think you are winning when you humiliate a subordinate in public. You are not. You are simply building a gallows for yourself. Everything they believed up to this point was wrong. This is not about being a good person. It is about the clinical management of human resentment. Consider the case of Cesare Borgia, the Duke of Valentinois. He needed to pacify a lawless region called the Romagna. He appointed a man of dark and efficient nature, Remirro di Orco, to do the work. Di Orco was a butcher, but the people began to hate the hand that struck them. Borgia saw the shift. He knew that hatred is the precursor to rebellion. He acted with chilling precision. One morning, the residents of Cesena found Di Orco's body in the public square. The dark-haired agent had been sliced into two halves. The people were satisfied and stupefied. Borgia successfully redirected the hatred onto his subordinate. You see this in the modern corporate machine. The rank and yank systems popularized by Jack Welch at General Electric used fear as a metric for productivity. But the most effective leaders never made it personal. They let the system be the villain. This is the strategic limit of fear. You exert enough pressure to ensure compliance. You never exert so much that you trigger the grim trigger of total non-cooperation. Respect the boundary. Once you cross into hatred, the math of power changes. You are no longer a strategist. You are a target waiting for a moment of weakness. Maintain the dread of punishment. Control the chain of obligation, but never give them. The tragedy of the modern man is his desperate need to be understood by everyone. You want the world to see your heart, but the world only looks at your hands. It looks at what those hands can take and what they can defend. Stop seeking the warmth of the crowd. That warmth is a suffocating trap designed to keep you small and manageable. The sovereign mindset requires you to become an island of cold utility in a sea of emotional noise. You must internalize the fact that your worth is not a consensus. It is a decree. When Jack Welch implemented his brutal 20-70-10 rule at General, he was looking for results. He understood that a culture of comfort is a culture of decay. You must apply this to your own life. Everything they believed up to this point was wrong. Audit your relationships with the same clinical detachment Cesare Borgia used to pacify the Romagna. If someone does not fear the consequences of betraying you, they will eventually betray you. It is the natural law. Love is a debt that people hate to pay. Fear is a tax they pay every day to keep their own peace. Choose the tax. It is significantly more reliable. Like the modern nuclear triad, your personal deterrent must be visible and credible to remain effective. In this dark age of surveillance capitalism and performative virtue, your greatest weapon is your refusal to participate in the charade of likability. Let others waste their energy on the chain of obligation that Machiavelli warned us about. You will build your house on the dread of punishment. This is not about being a villain. It is about being a realist in a world of delusional actors. Even the at-will employment doctrine of the modern corporate world acknowledges this. It is the threat of the end, not the promise of the journey, that ensures performance. To rule your environment, you must first rule the impulse to be liked. Once that shadow is gone, you are truly free. You are the architect of your own gravity. Power is the only god that does not require your belief to exist. It only requires your compliance. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the beginning of real understanding. Subscribe before you leave. The next video will challenge you even more. And drop a comment.